I never thought I'd say this, but inviting Ethan to stay with us was the worst decision of my life. At first, it seemed harmless. My younger cousin needed a place to crash while he figured out his next move, and Sophia, my wife, didn't hesitate to say yes. "He's family," she had said, flashing me that reassuring smile. I agreed, not thinking twice. Why would I? Ethan was 10 years younger than us, still wet behind the ears, and I'd always looked at him as more of a kid than an adult. What could possibly go wrong? A lot, apparently. It started small. Little things that I ignored because I didn't want to come across as paranoid. Sophia would laugh a little too hard at his jokes, the kind of laugh she hadn't shared with me in years. They'd exchange glances that lingered just a second too long, subtle enough to brush off, but just noticeable enough to bother me. I told myself it was nothing. I mean, Ethan was my cousin. He was practically a little brother to me, and Sophia? She was my wife of 10 years, the mother of my children. But once you start noticing things, it's hard to stop. One evening, I walked into the living room to find them sitting on the couch, heads close together as they whispered over something on Ethan's phone. They didn't hear me at first, and when they finally noticed I was there, Sophia pulled back so quickly it was almost comical. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice a little too cheerful. "Ethan was just showing me some funny videos." She held up the phone like she needed proof, and Ethan gave me a sheepish grin. "You gotta see this one, man," he said, his tone easy, carefree. I nodded, pretending to care, but I could feel the unease growing in my chest. That night, as I lay in bed beside Sophia, I couldn't shake the image of them on the couch. The way they looked so comfortable, like they shared some inside joke I wasn't a part of. I told myself I was overthinking it. I had to be. But the doubts were there, and they weren't going away. Over the next few weeks, the little things started adding up. Sophia began running errands at odd hours, always with some flimsy excuse. Ethan, too, started coming home late, claiming he'd been out job hunting or catching up with friends. They were small lies, but they stacked up like bricks, building a wall I couldn't ignore. The tipping point came one Saturday afternoon. I had the day off and planned to spend it with the kids while Sophia finished her shift at the gallery. Ethan had mentioned going out with friends the night before, so I assumed he'd be sleeping in. After breakfast, I decided to clean up the mess in the living room from the night before. Empty glasses and snack wrappers from the movie Ethan and Sophia had watched after I'd gone to bed early. I picked up a glass, noticing a smudge of lipstick on the rim. Sophia didn't wear lipstick often, and when she did, it was usually for date nights, not movie nights at home. My stomach twisted, but I shoved the thought aside. A glass with lipstick didn't mean anything, but as I tidied up, I found Ethan's hoodie draped over the armrest of the couch, and something fell out of the pocket. A receipt. My curiosity got the better of me, and I unfolded it. It was from a restaurant downtown, dated the previous night, with 2 meals and a bottle of wine listed. My first thought was that Ethan had gone on a date, but something about it didn't add up. He hadn't mentioned going out, and the time on the receipt, 10:32 p.m., was long after I'd heard him and Sophia laughing in the living room. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the receipt crumpled in my hand, my mind racing. Was it possible they'd gone out together? No, I told myself. There had to be another explanation. But the thought lingered, refusing to let go. That night, I couldn't sleep. Sophia lay beside me, her breathing slow and steady, while my mind replayed every interaction I'd seen between her and Ethan. The laughter, the glances, the way they seemed to share some unspoken connection. It was like a puzzle I couldn't quite piece together, but I knew the picture forming wasn't one I wanted to see. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Sophia making breakfast. She greeted me with her usual smile, but it felt different this time, like it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Morning," she said, sliding a plate of pancakes onto the table. "You're up early." I nodded, sitting down across from her. "Couldn't sleep?" She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Is everything okay?" I wanted to ask her outright if there was something going on between her and Ethan, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I shook my head. "Yeah, just work stuff. You know how it is." She nodded, her focus shifting back to the pancakes. It was a lie, of course, but I wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. That afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. Sophia hadn't expected me. I could tell by the way she jumped when I walked into the living room, her phone slipping from her hand onto the couch. She scrambled to pick it up, her face flushing as she forced a laugh. "You scared me," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. "What are you doing home so early?" "Meeting got canceled," I replied, watching her carefully. "What about you? What's got you so jumpy?" She shook her head, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Nothing. Just scrolling through some emails." I didn't push her, but my gut told me something wasn't right. She was hiding something, and I was determined to find out what. That night, while she was in the shower, I checked her phone. My hands trembled as I swiped through her messages, my heart pounding in my chest. Most of it was normal, chats with friends, reminders from the gallery, but then I found a conversation with Ethan. The messages were short, cryptic. Things like, "Did you like it?" and "Can't stop thinking about earlier." My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the screen. I scrolled up, hoping to make sense of what it was, and that's when I saw it. A photo. My stomach churned as I opened it, and there it was, a picture of Ethan, smug and self-assured, revealing far more of himself than I ever wanted to see. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I couldn't unsee it. The image was burned into my mind, a confirmation of everything I didn't want to believe. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. My hands trembled as I stared at the photo, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. It was Ethan, not just a picture of him, but an image so brazen, so intimate that I couldn't breathe. He'd sent it to Sophia, my wife. My wife had kept it. She hadn't deleted it. I wanted to convince myself this was some sort of mistake, but there was no mistaking what was right in front of me. The confidence in the way he posed, the smugness, the way he clearly knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't some casual accident. This was deliberate. And Sophia had saved it. My stomach churned, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This couldn't be real. There was no way this was happening in my own house, under my own roof. Ethan had always been like a little brother to me. I'd let him into my home, trusted him, given him a place to stay, and this was how he repaid me? But worse than that, Sophia. My wife, the woman I'd spent a decade of my life with, the mother of my children. How could she betray me like this? I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to smash something just to release the rage building inside me. But I couldn't move. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing to find some explanation that didn't end with my entire life being a lie. But there wasn't one. There couldn't be. I closed the photo, my finger hovering over the messages. I needed to know more. I scrolled through their conversation, my chest tightening with every word. Their exchanges were short, cryptic, but the meaning was clear. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. What if he finds out?" My vision blurred as I read those words over and over. They weren't even trying to hide it. They were laughing behind my back, carrying on this sick affair right under my nose. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? Longer? I didn't know, and the not knowing made it worse. My breathing grew shallow, my thoughts spiraling out of control. Then I heard it, a sound from the first floor. At first, I thought I was imagining things, the creak of a floorboard barely audible over the rush of blood in my ears. But then it came again, louder this time. My heart stopped. I glanced at the time on the phone. It was late, far too late for anyone to be up. Sophia was supposed to be asleep. Ethan had gone out, or at least that's what he'd said. So what was that sound? Slowly, I stood, my body moving on instinct. I set the phone down on the bed, my hands still shaking as I tried to steady myself. The sound came again, faint but unmistakable. A low murmur, a soft noise that made my skin crawl. I moved toward the stairs, my footsteps silent as I descended. The house was dark, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the windows. The closer I got to the first floor, the louder the sounds became. A faint murmur, almost rhythmic, broken only by a sharp intake of breath that sent a chill down my spine. I stopped at the base of the stairs, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might give me away. Then I saw it. The door to the guest room was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. I moved closer, each step heavier than the last. The noises were clearer now, soft and unmistakable. My stomach twisted, dread clawing at my chest as I reached the door. I peered inside, and the world seemed to stop. My mind struggled to comprehend what I was seeing. Ethan was lying on the bed, his shirt off, his face flushed with a mix of pleasure and smug satisfaction. And there, at the edge of the bed, was Sophia, my wife. She was kneeling in front of him, her lips moving over him in a way that made my stomach turn. Her hands rested on his thighs, her movements slow and deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. She was so focused, so intent, that she didn't notice me standing there, frozen in the doorway. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My mind screamed at me to do something, to stop this, but my body refused to obey. I felt like I was outside of myself, watching the scene unfold like some horrible nightmare. My breath caught in my throat as I took a step back, the sound of my movement breaking the spell. Sophia froze. Her head turned slowly, her eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, everything was silent. The world seemed to hold its breath as we stared at each other, the weight of what I'd just seen hanging between us. Her face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the words, but none came. Ethan sat up, his expression shifting from surprise to something I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe, or guilt. I didn't care. I couldn't look at them anymore. Without a word, I turned and walked away, my legs shaking as I climbed the stairs back to the bedroom. I slammed the door behind me, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. My mind was racing, my thoughts colliding in a chaotic mess of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. How could she do this? How could they do this? I felt like my entire world had been ripped apart in an instant. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, trying to make sense of everything. But there was no sense to be made. This wasn't something I could rationalize or explain away. This was betrayal, pure and simple. And the worst part was, I didn't know what to do next. Do I confront them? Do I leave? Do I pretend this never happened? None of it felt real. None of it felt like something I could handle. The sound of footsteps brought me back to reality. The door creaked open, and Sophia stepped inside, her face a mixture of fear and desperation. "Look," she started, her voice trembling. "Please let me explain." I looked at her, my chest tightening as I took in the sight of her. The woman I had loved, trusted, built a life with. Now she was a stranger to me, someone I didn't recognize. "Don't," I said, my voice cold and sharp. "I don't want to hear it." She flinched at my tone, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and bitter. "Not what it looks like?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I just saw you, Sophia. I saw everything. Don't you dare try to lie to me." She broke down then, her body shaking as she sobbed, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity. Just anger. Just pain. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I didn't mean for this to happen." I shook my head, my jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "You didn't mean for this to happen?" I said, my voice filled with venom. "You didn't mean to betray me? To humiliate me? To destroy everything we built?" She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back, putting distance between us. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice cold. "You made your choice, Sophia. You chose him. Now you have to live with it." Sophia's eyes were swollen with tears as she stood there, trembling, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. "Say it," I demanded, my voice sharp. "Don't just stand there crying. Say it, Sophia. Tell me why you've been crawling into bed with Ethan behind my back." She flinched as if I'd slapped her, her lips quivering as she whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Didn't mean for it to happen? You don't just accidentally do something like this. You made a choice. You made the choice to lie to me, betray me, and destroy our family." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I felt alone, Luke," she said, her voice trembling. "You were always at work, always too busy for me. I needed someone, and Ethan. He was there. So it's my fault? I said, my voice rising. I worked hard to give you everything you could ever want, and this is how you repay me? By cheating on me with my cousin? You weren't there, she cried, her voice breaking. You don't understand how lonely it was, sitting here every night, waiting for you to come home. Ethan made me feel wanted. He listened to me. I stared at her, my chest heaving with anger. You could have talked to me, I said through gritted teeth. You could have told me how you felt. But no, you went behind my back. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed our family, our kids. Do you even care about them? She sobbed harder, her body trembling as she shook her head. I do care, Luke. I care about all of you. I made a mistake, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. Love? I said, my voice dripping with venom. Don't even say that word. You don't get to talk about love after what you've done. Love doesn't look like this. She sank to the floor, her hands covering her face as she cried, but I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. Her tears meant nothing to me now. I turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind me. The silence in the house was suffocating. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, my thoughts a storm of anger and disbelief. I could still hear Sophia crying upstairs, but I didn't care. Her tears didn't mean anything to me now. All I could see was the image of her and Ethan, burned into my mind like a scar I'd never be able to erase. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I didn't know. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. I looked up to see Sophia standing at the bottom, her face pale and blotchy from crying. We need to talk, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There's nothing to talk about, I replied coldly. I've seen enough. She shook her head, stepping closer. No, you haven't. There's more, and you deserve to know. My stomach tightened as I stared at her, dreading whatever she was about to say. What are you talking about? I demanded. She hesitated, her hands trembling as she wrung them together. It wasn't just Ethan, she said finally, her voice breaking. There were others. The room seemed to spin as her words sank in. Others? I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. What the hell does that mean, Sophia? She looked down at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. When you went out with your friends late at night, I wasn't alone. My chest tightened, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. You mean to tell me that while I was out with my friends, you were here, cheating on me with them? She nodded, her tears falling faster now. It didn't mean anything, she said quickly, as if that would make it better. I was just so lonely, Luke. I needed to feel something, anything. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My own friends. She betrayed me with my cousin, and now this? You disgust me, I said, my voice trembling with fury. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, my trust. You've ruined it all. She sobbed harder, her body shaking as she tried to speak. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry. Please, Luke, you have to forgive me. I'll do anything to fix this. I shook my head, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. There's no fixing this, I said, my voice cold and final. You didn't just make a mistake, Sophia. You made a series of choices, over and over again, to betray me. And now you expect me to forgive you? To just forget about everything you've done? I'll do anything, she said desperately, falling to her knees in front of me. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please, don't leave me. I stared down at her, my chest heaving with anger and pain. For a moment, I thought about everything we'd built together. The house, the kids, the life I thought we shared. But now I saw it for what it really was, a lie. It's too late for that, I said, stepping back. You've already destroyed us. There's no coming back from this. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I told him everything. About Ethan, about the messages, about her confession. He listened quietly, his tone professional but sympathetic. We'll get this sorted, he said finally. If what you're saying is true, you'll have a strong case for custody. Over the next few days, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. The messages on her phone, the receipts, everything. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She'd made her choices, and now she was going to face the consequences. When the court date finally arrived, I felt a mix of anger and determination as I sat in the courtroom, watching Sophia avoid my gaze. She looked fragile, broken, but I didn't care. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about my kids, about protecting them from the damage she'd caused. My lawyer presented the evidence, laying everything out in painstaking detail. The judge listened intently, his expression growing graver with each passing moment. When it was finally over, the ruling was clear. I was granted full custody of the kids. Sophia was left with nothing. No house, no family, no future with us. As we left the courtroom, she approached me, her eyes red and swollen. "Please, Luke," she said, her voice barely audible. "Don't do this. Don't take them away from me." I looked at her, my expression cold and unyielding. "You did this to yourself, Sophia," I said. "You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." I turned and walked away, my kids' hands in mine, knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter. It wasn't the one I had planned for, but it was one where I could finally start to heal. The day I walked out of that courtroom with my kids was the first time I'd felt peace in months. The weight of betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak. It wasn't gone, but it was quieter now, overshadowed by the sense of purpose that came with knowing I was doing what was best for my family. Sophia had made her choices, and now I was making mine. Life didn't magically become easy after that. There were challenges, sleepless nights, and moments when I questioned everything. But slowly, we found our rhythm again. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, making sure the kids knew they were my priority. I worked hard, but I made time for them. School events, bedtime stories, lazy Sundays at the park. It was a new kind of life, and it wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Then came Emily. She wasn't someone I'd been looking for, but life has a funny way of bringing people into your world when you least expect it. Emily was a widow, raising her own son after losing her husband a few years earlier. We met at a parent-teacher meeting, both of us trying to navigate the maze of school schedules and responsibilities on our own. She had this warmth about her, a kindness that was hard to ignore. The kids took to her immediately, and her son, Max, fit right in with my two. What started as polite conversations turned into shared lunches, then playdates, and before I knew it, Emily and I were spending more time together than apart. She understood what I'd been through in a way no one else could. She didn't push, didn't pry. She just listened when I needed to talk and offered a steady presence when I didn't. Slowly, she became more than a friend. She became a part of our lives, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. When we decided to move to a new town, it felt like the fresh start we all needed. The kids were excited about their new school, their new friends, and the new house Emily and I had chosen together. It was smaller than the one I'd shared with Sophia, but it was cozy and filled with love. Every room felt alive with laughter, the walls decorated with family photos and the kids' drawings. It wasn't just a house, it was home. Our days settled into a comfortable routine. The kids thrived at school, making friends and bringing home stories about their teachers and classmates. Max blended seamlessly into our family, and it didn't take long for him to start calling me Dad. Emily and I worked together to create a stable, happy life for them and for ourselves. I hadn't thought it was possible to feel this kind of peace again, but with Emily, everything felt right. It was during one of those peaceful evenings, after the kids had gone to bed and Emily and I were sitting on the porch, that I heard the rumors. A friend from our old neighborhood had called, catching me up on the latest gossip. At first, it was the usual small talk, who had moved, who was having another baby. But then they mentioned Sophia. "I don't know if you've heard," my friend said, her voice hesitant, "but Sophia and Ethan, things didn't turn out so well for them." My chest tightened at the mention of their names. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. They're not doing great," she said. "Last I heard, they'd lost the apartment they were renting. Someone said they've been staying in shelters, maybe even on the streets." I sat there in silence, the weight of her words sinking in. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Pity? Satisfaction? Maybe all of it at once. "I see," I said finally, not sure what else to say. "I thought you'd want to know," she said softly. For what it's worth, you made the right decision. Your kids are lucky to have you. Thanks, I said, hanging up a few moments later. I sat there for a long time, staring out at the darkened street. Emily came out a few minutes later, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She set one in front of me and sat down beside me, her hand resting gently on my knee. Everything okay? She asked, her voice soft. I nodded, still trying to process what I just heard. Just some news about Sophia and Ethan, I said. Apparently, they're struggling. Emily didn't say anything at first, just sipped her tea and watched me carefully. How does that make you feel? She asked finally. I thought about it for a moment, searching for the answer. I don't know, I admitted. I don't wish them well, but I don't know if I wanted this for them either. Emily nodded, her hand squeezing mine gently. It's okay to feel conflicted, she said. You're a good person, Luke. That's why this doesn't feel easy, even after everything they did to you. Her words settled over me like a balm, easing the tension in my chest. She was right. I wasn't the kind of person who took joy in someone else's suffering, no matter how much they deserved it. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the sense of justice in knowing they were facing the consequences of their choices. As I sat there with Emily, the warmth of her hand in mine and the sound of the kids' laughter still echoing faintly from the house, I realized how far I'd come. Sophia and Ethan were a part of my past, a chapter I'd closed. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It was filled with love, with purpose, and with a future I could look forward to. And for the first time in years, that was enough.